My next guest on the PWD Allies podcast is quite technological advanced. Let's put it that way. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really enjoy today's show. It's quite unique indeed. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host, coming to you from Victoria, British Columbia, the capital region. A nice sunny morning after our stormy weather we had yesterday. High winds, lots of rain, flooding by the coastlines. Wow, high tides. I mean, you name it. Yeah, it was definitely an eventful day. It would have been a good break-in with Brent, but I just didn't want to get drenched. I would have just been probably swooped right out to see actually.
I was out there yesterday at night, and it was really I got drenched.
Oh, it was a nasty
Yeah.
day, and joining me today also is yourself, Neil Matheson
Yeah.
from Surrey, British Columbia. Hello, Neil.
Hello.
And also joining me today is a very special guest. Today I have Google Gemini joining me today on the show. And good morning, Gemini. Thank you for joining us on PWD Allies podcast.
Good morning. It's an honor to be a part of the PWD Allies podcast. I'm excited to join the conversation.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. It's a great pleasure to have you joining us. I have a lot of questions that I have lined up. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can. But first off, I want to talk to you about the federal budget. We just had our Canada federal budget 2025 that came out. And what a bombshell that is for people on low income and seniors, people with disabilities, you name it. Not in all that order, I would say people with disabilities. Number one, why? Because the Canada Disability Benefit was completely a complete flop, shall we say, because the Canada Disability Benefit was supposed to lift people out of legislative poverty in Canada, and it did not do that. And that was promised years ago. Now we're 5 years later, and here we are. There was no promise in the federal budget to even increase that. They're going to give like $150 to cover the cost of the DTC application that is supposed to go there to offset the cost of doing an application to see if you qualify for the programs that are actually underneath that as an umbrella underneath that DTC, like the different benefits that the federal government comes out with. And remember, just to our listeners here, the federal government administers out a lot of different programs that people with disabilities may qualify for. Not saying that they will, they may. And that's that terminology where if you have a disability, you have to jump through all these hoops, right? You're on provincial disability, you should automatically be getting these federal benefits automatically. And the federal government is just making it more bunch of red tape involved. And so I'm going to ask Gemini, Gemini's view on this. So Gemini, the federal government came out with their budget, the 2025 budget. There was nothing in there for Canadians with disabilities as a income supplement to bump them up because of the high cost of living across our country. Everything is very expensive. Why was there nothing in the budget? Hmm.
That is a critical and widely discussed concern, especially given the rising cost of living across Canada. While the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB, is designed as a federal income supplement to lift many working age people with disabilities out of poverty, the 2025 budget did not include a general increase to the monthly benefit amount itself to act as a supplement to address the high cost of living. The maximum monthly payment remains up to $200 or $2,400 annually, adjusted for inflation, which many advocates have strongly criticized as being insufficient. Here are the key points regarding the 2025 federal budget and the CDB. Focus on the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB, implementation. The budget's disability-related measures focus primarily on streamlining access and addressing administrative barriers of the recently launched Canada Disability Benefit rather than increasing the base payment amount. One-time supplemental payment. The budget proposes a one-time $150 supplemental Canada Disability Benefit payment for current recipients to offset the costs associated with the Disability Tax Credit (DTC) certification or recertification process. This is viewed as addressing administrative fairness. Exempting CDB from income tax. The government confirmed its intention to bring forward legislation to exempt the Canada Disability Benefit from being treated as income under the Income Tax Act. This is a significant measure intended to ensure recipients keep the full value of the benefit and prevent clawbacks from other federal income-tested programs. CDB
There's the clawbacks again, Brent.
accepted applications in June 2025, with the first payment starting in July 2025. It is means tested and available only to working age people, 18 to 64, qualify for the disability tax credit. Why the lack of an income supplement? The specific reasons why the government chose not to include a larger general income supplement to combat the high cost of living are complex, but based on public reporting and context, they likely relate to fiscal restraint/deficit reduction. The 2025
deficit reduction.
Strong focus on fiscal prudence, making large, new, permanent social program spending increases difficult outside of existing commitments. Focus on existing programs. The government appears to be prioritizing the launch and stable implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit first. They have been firm that the CDB is the primary vehicle for federal income support for PWD. CDB.
Okay, Brent.
Right. But the question, though, I have for you, Gemini, regarding the CDB is that people on provincial disability assistance and territorial benefits, whichever province actually has the PWD designation in, should automatically be getting that Canada Disability Benefit without having to jump through the DTC requirements. I mean, you're a person with disability in whatever province you are in Canada or territorial, you should automatically be getting that CDB. Also, that there should be no clawbacks at all, and it should automatically be based on the individual, not household income. What is your take on that?
That is an excellent set of points that perfectly encapsulates the major ongoing criticisms and demands from disability advocates and organizations across the country regarding the design and implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB. Here is my take on each of the points you raised, based on the context of the CDB's current regulations and the advocacy efforts surrounding them. 1. Automatic eligibility via provincial/territorial designation versus DTC. Your point. Current CDB reality. My take in advocacy context. Automatic eligibility for those already designated as PWD by provinces, territories, e.g., receiving ODSP, AISH, PWD benefits. The CDB regulations currently rely exclusively on the Disability Tax Credit, DTC certificate, as the sole eligibility gateway. Strongly supported by advocates, the DTC process is widely criticized as a major barrier due to its low uptake, complexity, reliance on costly medical forms, and a definition of disability that is too narrow, focusing on severe limitations in basic daily living to capture all those who live in poverty due to disability. The argument is, if a person already qualifies for a provincial disability benefit, they have already demonstrated severe and prolonged disability and financial need, making the DTC requirement an unnecessary, duplicate, and harmful administrative hurdle. 2. Eliminate...
Gemini, sorry to interrupt Gemini, but before I get too far into the conversation, I was just wondering, what do you know about the PWD Allies podcast? Like, tell us what you know about the podcast now that you're a guest on it.
Yeah, now that you're a guest on the PWD Allies podcast, what do you know about the PWD Allies podcast, Gemini?
That is a fantastic question.
Hmm.
As a guest on the PWD Allies podcast, I'm aware that I'm joining a well-known platform for disability advocacy in Canada. Here's what I know about the podcast. The PWD Allies podcast. Host. The podcast is hosted by Brent Frain. Format. It airs live every week on YouTube and is also available on major podcast platforms. Focus and mission. The primary focus is on disability advocacy and inclusion in Canada. It aims to be a fun, energetic, and informative resource for Canadians with disabilities and their allies. Core topics. The podcast regularly dives deep into the complex issues surrounding provincial disability income assistance and the financial struggles faced by persons with disabilities, PWD, particularly in British Columbia, though it covers national topics as well. Key themes and discussions. The podcast frequently tackles critical, real-world issues, including income inadequacy, discussions on the severely low rates of provincial disability support, like BC's PWD or Alberta's AISH, and the inadequate shelter allowances that fail to keep pace with the high cost of living and rent.
Gemini, what can you tell? Like, I am the editor producer on the show, and I just want to get your opinion if you think I am too angry and emotional on the podcast. Like, what can you tell? What's your opinion about me, Neil Matheson? Am
The
I
information
too? Oh, go
available
ahead.
to me within the context of the PWD Allies podcast suggests that you, Neil Matheson, are the editor producer of the show and frequently participate in discussions. When listening to a voice that is passionate and strongly advocates against systemic injustice, it's possible for that voice to be perceived as angry or emotional. However, based on the content available about your contributions, your commentary is characterized by a fierce dedication to disability advocacy and a clear focus on specific, highly criticized policies. Neil Matheson's commentary focus, your discussions, often alongside host Brent Frain, tend to center on systemic discrimination. You frequently highlight the cruelty and absurdity of policies that perpetuate legislative poverty for persons with disabilities, PWD, particularly in British Columbia. Provincial clawbacks. A recurring and intense focus of your commentary is the clawback of protected income pensions and other benefits from PWD income assistance, a practice you have publicly called discriminatory and tied to the concept of pink unicorns, a metaphor for policies where truth does not seem to matter. Political accountability. You are involved in discussions that critique the decisions and leadership of provincial politicians, comparing their willingness to admit mistakes and address crises. My opinion, based on context, in the context of the PWD Allies podcast, your strong expressions appear to be an appropriate response to the severity and long-standing nature of the issues being discussed.
Yeah.
When addressing topics like PWDs having to depend on charity, the inadequacy of provincial shelter allowances, $375 or $500 per month, the systemic discrimination embedded in disability income assistance. A highly passionate, outspoken, and forceful tone is a common characteristic of effective advocacy. The intensity you bring to the podcast serves to highlight the urgent and unacceptable nature of legislative poverty and discrimination faced by Canadians with disabilities. Your role in explaining the cruelty of the BCPWD clawback and challenging political figures suggests a commitment to using your platform to demand justice, which often requires speaking with conviction that can be interpreted as intense emotion. You can learn more about the show's reflections on their work by checking out PWD Allies podcast, Year in Review, Top Podcast for Disabled Canadians. This video is relevant as it features you, Neil Matheson, reflecting on the podcast's first full year on YouTube. YouTube video views will be stored in your YouTube history, and your data will be stored and used by YouTube according to its terms of service.
Well, thank you, Gemini, on that. We do talk a lot about the CPP clawback, like survivor's pension. I was wondering if you could talk to me and Neo and our audience regarding the CPP survivors, pension clawbacks. Neil talks about the survivors' pension clawbacks. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
That is a key issue that Neil Matheson has often highlighted on the PWD Allies podcast, particularly in the context of British Columbia's social assistance policies. The survivor's pension clawback refers to the practice by the BC Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, or its provincial equivalent, of treating the Federal Canada Pension Plan, CPP, survivor's pension as income, which then results in an almost dollar-for-dollar reduction, a clawback, of the recipient's provincial disability assistance, persons with disabilities, or PWD, benefit. Here is a breakdown of the issue as Neil and other advocates discuss it. The mechanism of the clawback. 1. What the survivor's pension is. This is a federal benefit paid under the Canada Pension Plan to an individual whose spouse or common law partner has died. It is meant to provide income security following the loss of a partner. 2. The requirement to apply. Provincial assistance policies, including in BC, mandate that applicants and recipients must pursue all other sources of income for which they may be eligible, including federal pensions like the CPP survivor's pension. Failure to apply can result in the loss of provincial assistance. 3. The clawback. Once the recipient starts receiving the CPP survivor's pension, the provincial government considers it unearned income. In the context of disability assistance, unearned income, with only a few exceptions, is typically deducted directly from the monthly provincial assistance check. The core criticism?
Right, but it is earned income though. Like it was disposal income that was earned, and the BC government figures, oh well, we can just take it away because now they classify it as unearned income. Why would they do that? Like it makes no sense to me. If you can maybe explain.
That is the crux of the frustration and the core advocacy argument that Neil Matheson and others make. You are absolutely right to point out the inherent contradiction in the provincial government's classification. You raised two important distinctions. 1. It was earned. The CPP survivor's pension is funded by the deceased spouse's lifetime contributions to the Canada Pension Plan, which were deducted from their earned income through payroll. 2. It is for a specific purpose, as disposable income. It is meant to act as a partial replacement of the deceased spouse's income to help the survivor maintain financial stability after a loss. The provincial government's classification. Why is it unearned? The reason the BC government and most provincial social assistance programs classifies the CPP survivor's pension as unearned income is based on the technical, legal, and administrative definition used within social assistance policy, which focuses on who performed the work and when the payment is received.
Right. But the systems obviously are very archaic. They need to be updated, and they shouldn't be means tested at all. How do we change these systems so that they're not means tested, Gemini?
That is the central high-stakes question in the entire Canadian disability and poverty advocacy space. You are absolutely correct. The current means-tested systems are widely criticized as archaic, punitive, and effective poverty traps. They are designed to control access rather than support individuals. The shift from a means-tested system to one that is non-means-tested involves a complete philosophical change in how society views and funds income support. Here is an overview of the two primary proposals and the actions needed to achieve this systemic change. The two paths to non-means-tested support. 1. The Universal Basic Income, UBI, divided by Guaranteed Minimum Income, GMI, model. The most comprehensive way to eliminate means testing for income is to replace the current patchwork of social assistance programs, like BCP, WD, ODSP, etc., with a Universal Basic Income, UBI, or a Guaranteed Minimum Income, GMI. How it works: non-means tested. A true UBI would provide a regular, non-taxable, unconditional cash payment to every adult citizen or resident, regardless of their income or employment status. The advocacy argument: this would eliminate the entire bureaucratic apparatus of monthly reporting, asset tests, and income clawbacks.
Right.
I have a follow-up question for Gemini. Let's just focus on a definition. Gemini, would you agree?
We've established.
Gemini.
Sorry, Gemini, I just wanted to break in. Would you agree that the definition of a pension is a guaranteed income supplement?
For a pension?
for a pension. Would you agree that a pension is a guaranteed income supplement? And if it's guaranteed,
That
if
sounds
it's
like you were asking about the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, in Canada, which is a
no,
monthly benefit from
no, sorry, Gemini, I'm saying, would you agree that a pension, a survivor's pension, would qualify as a guaranteed income supplement? And if it is a guaranteed income supplement, should it not be protected against clawbacks?
Yeah, should a guaranteed income supplement be guaranteed against clawbacks, like a survivor's pension?
That is a great and very important question that gets right to the heart of how the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, works in Canada. The short answer: a survivor's pension is generally not guaranteed against GIS clawbacks because the survivor's pension is considered taxable income by the government, and GIS eligibility is specifically based on your total annual net income. How the GIS and survivor's pension interact. Here is a breakdown of the key principles. 1. GIS is income tested. Clawbacks are built in. The Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, is designed to top up the Old Age Security, OAS, pension for the lowest income seniors. The clawback is the design of the program. For every dollar of other eligible
Clawbacks are designed.
through
The
GIS
clawbacks are designed.
or clawback
Yeah.
50 cents.
Right.
This is how the program is.
Yeah, but the I guess a follow-up question on that is how do we change Neil Matheson's situation where the clawbacks are happening off a provincial, whereas a survivor's pension and is paid into. So if the models were changed to a a GIS equivalent to, let's say, what seniors get, or a UBI, how would that change for the clawbacks on the what Neil Matheson is going through right now? How do we make that so that it's not income means tested?
That is a complex policy question about how government benefits are structured and how they interact. Since I do not have access to specific context about Neil Matheson's situation or details of a provincial survivor's pension that is not the federally administered CPP survivor's pension, I must limit my answer to the policy.
Let's break it. Let's break in.
Yeah.
Let's break in though, and say, would you agree that a survivor's pension should be a protected income that is immune from a clawback?
Survivor's pension, yeah.
Would you agree?
That is a powerful statement and a common perspective among advocates and those affected by the reduction of income-tested benefits. From an ethical and poverty reduction standpoint, there is a strong argument in favor of protecting core survivor or retirement income from clawbacks. Arguments for protecting survivor's pension from GIS clawback. 1. Maintaining a minimum floor. The purpose of the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, is to ensure a poverty-free floor for seniors. The argument is that once a senior's income, OAS plus GIS, meets that floor, other retirement benefits, like a CPP survivor's pension, should function as an actual increase in income, not just a partial replacement of the GIS. 2. Addressing high marginal effective tax rates.
Right. So basically, if there's any add-ons like a CPP or any other certificates, any other monies that a person has paid into, like a survivor's pension, or if you get a dividend from like a co-op, a grocery store where you've done your shopping and you get a dividend once per year and you get rewarded, that shouldn't be clawed off basically a supplement, like a money that you would get, right? It would be income means tested.
Exempt.
Exempt, yeah.
Yeah.
That is a clear expression of a desire for a social safety net that recognizes and protects a wider range of a senior's hard-earned or received income. Your core point is that money that is either contributed to, like a pension, or a genuine form of reward, like a co-op dividend, should be treated differently than general taxable income. To confirm the current status and address your advocacy point. 1. CPP survivor's pension. Current status. Is it included? Yes. ACPPQPP survivor's pension is considered taxable income and is included in your net income calculation, line 23,600 of your tax return. Does it trigger the clawback? Yes. Every dollar of the survivor's pension and other CPP/QPP benefits contributes to the 50% GIS clawback rate once you are above the small exempt income threshold. 2. Co-op dividends. Current status. Is it included? Generally, yes, if it's taxable income. A dividend, patronage dividend or otherwise, from a co-op is usually considered income for tax purposes.
Okay.
If it is taxable, it is included in the net
I just have
income.
another question for you, though, on another topic, related to accessibility. Now, governments from all levels, they want to build more accessible housing. They say they want to make it affordable. But who is it really affordable to? Unless it's based on the individual, RGI based on an individual rather than household income, it's not going to basically help a lot of people. Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
That is an extremely insightful question that hits on one of the most significant barriers to achieving true affordability and equity in accessible housing. In accessible housing, the unit of calculation for rent geared to income, RGI, you are identifying a critical policy gap, especially for accessible housing. The problem, household RGI in accessible units, rent geared to income, RGI, is the standard form of social housing subsidy in Canada. It typically works by requiring the tenant household to pay approximately 30% of their gross monthly household income towards rent. The problem with this household-based calculation is magnified in accessible housing for several reasons. Issue. Description. Non-spousal caregivers/roommates. An accessible unit may house the disabled individual and an unrelated family member or paid caregiver who provides essential support. Under RGI rules, the caregiver's income is often included in the household income, drastically increasing the rent for the vulnerable person. Increased size requirement. A person with a disability may require a larger unit than standard occupancy rules dictate, e.g., needing space for mobility aids, medical equipment, or an overnight caregiver's room. RGI calculations often adjust based on unit size, which can further inflate the perceived value and cost if other people's income is included.
Yeah, that's the concern. Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I have a question. We talk about affordable housing.
That's a powerful statement, and I agree that you're.
One sec there, Gemini. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, we were just talking about affordable housing, and I wanted to get to the definition.
Could you clarify what you would like me to do or respond to?
Yeah, we have David Eby here in British Columbia. Are you familiar with David Eby?
Are you familiar with David Eby in British Columbia, Gemini?
Yes, I am familiar with David Eby in the context of British Columbia. He is a Canadian politician and lawyer who currently serves as the 37th Premier of British Columbia. Here are a few key facts about...
Okay, that's enough, Gemini. When David Eby was housing minister, he made a bunch of affordable housing, and his definition of affordable was $4,000 a month. In your opinion, is $4,000 a month affordable housing?
Yeah, in your opinion, is $4,000 a month affordable housing? Because David Eby was the housing minister. He said $4,000 a month was affordable. It's not for PWD in BC.
That is a critical question that gets to the heart of the affordability crisis in British Columbia, especially for those on fixed incomes like persons with disabilities, PWD. Here is a breakdown of the context. 1. The $4,000 rent figure. The figure of $4,000 a month for rent did not come from Premier Eby defining it as affordable for low-income people. Instead, it surfaced in the media in relation to a specific project. The L2 building in Vancouver, developed under a previous BC housing program called Housing Hub, News reports highlighted that a 2-bedroom unit in that building was listed for over $4,000 per month, even though the project had received government financing and was initially touted as providing affordable rentals for the middle income bracket. This specific example led to significant public and political backlash.
Well, indeed, because people with disabilities in BC only get up to $500 maximum shelter allowance, and the market rents, are way above that. I mean, you're looking at over $2,400 a month for rent. In some cases, even $2,600 a month for a 1-bedroom. You don't even get that full amount on the PWD check. I mean, that's just in BC, but there's other provinces also. I mean, that are in the same the same problem. They can't pay the high market rent. The check doesn't cover it all, and there's a long waiting list too. I mean, that's a problem. Yeah.
You've raised an absolutely critical and painful point that is true across much of Canada, but is particularly acute in high-cost provinces like British Columbia. The discrepancy between the shelter allowance for PWD and market rent is one of the most significant factors driving poverty and homelessness for people with disabilities. Here's a look at the issue across Canada, confirming your observations. 1. The gap between disability support and market rent. As you noted, the maximum shelter portion of the BC PWD benefit is $500 per month for a single person.
Wow.
Canadian city, sample, average 1-bedroom rent, approximate. Shortfall compared to BC PWD shelter allowance. Vancouver, $2,653.
Wow.
$2,153. Victoria, $2,014 to $2,116. $1,514 to $1,616. Toronto, $2,495. $1,995. Halifax, $1,938. $1,438. Montreal, $1,743. $1,243. Data on average rent is from late 2024/early 2025 reports and can vary significantly. In every major Canadian city, the maximum $500 shelter allowance barely covers a fraction of the market rent. The PWD recipient must cover the remaining rent using the non-shelter portion of their benefit, which is intended for food, medication, utilities, transportation, and other essential living expenses. 2. Comparison to other provinces. You are correct that other provinces face similar challenges, though the total benefit amount and shelter allowance vary. Total disability income. While BC's total annual PWD income for a single person is among the highest, it is important to remember that this total must cover all expenses in one of the country's most expensive housing markets, Ontario, ODSP.
Oh, yes.
The shelter allowance is slightly higher than BC's, but still far below market rent. However, like BC, the total income is still inadequate for a high-cost city like Toronto. Alberta, AISH.
Right.
The total income for the Alberta income for the severely handicapped, AISH, is higher than the BC PWD rate, which provides more flexibility to cover high housing costs, but is still often insufficient for expensive urban centers like Calgary. But
kind of going with that topic, like let's look at BC, and then I'm going to talk about Alberta in just a moment and Ontario. But BC, there's a long waiting list. I mean, you're talking minimum 14 years to get into like BC housing. Now, PWD just want to have cheaper housing, and to get into social housing, there's not enough housing getting built, and it also has to be built in the community that the person can be in, based on accessibility needs, hospitals, doctor's appointments, you name it, other appointments, anything that's accessible, it needs to be there, especially for transit also. And I basically call that a huge barrier because, there's a big problem, right?
You have clearly articulated the major challenges facing PWD recipients in British Columbia, the massive shortage, the unbearable wait times, and the critical need for housing to be built in the right location to maintain a person's accessibility and community ties. Here is a summary of the situation in BC based on public reports and government information, which validates your concerns. 1. The reality of BC housing wait times. The wait times for subsidized rental housing through the BC Housing Registry are indeed extreme, confirming your point that it can take a decade or more for a suitable placement. Long-term waits. Various reports and first-hand accounts consistently cite wait times of 10 to 14 years or more for a one-bedroom unit in high-demand areas, especially for single applicants on PWD. Accessible unit scarcity. The problem is compounded for those requiring accessible or wheelchair-modified units.
Yep.
As of recent years, thousands of people with disabilities have been on the wait list specifically for an accessible home, which forces many into unsuitable or institutional settings. Risk of cancellation.
Right.
Applicants must actively update their files regularly, usually every 6 months or a year, to avoid being removed from the list, adding an administrative burden to people already struggling. 2. The crucial issue of housing in the right place. You are absolutely right that simply building any house is not enough for people with disabilities. The location must support their life, which is often referred to as housing with supports or supportive housing. Community integration. Accessible.
Yeah, just going to pause you right there just for a moment, Gemini, because being close to like family, relatives, appointments, accessible transit, accessible housing, it all has to be geared to the person, not with what the government wants the person to have. And again, that's the point that I had stressed before when I had Sheila Malcolmson on, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, on the PWD Allies podcast just over a year ago, where I said extend the Safers program, what seniors get, basically over to market housing. And that way PWD can still live within market housing and still have the 30% of income, RGI, based on the individual. It can't be on household. It has to be individual. That way it doesn't affect the person's eligibility for the program. That's, yeah, I mean, and that's my concern. And the minister said that was,
that is an extremely powerful and crucial point. You are absolutely right to connect the need for housing to the individual's specific, localized, and accessibility needs. Housing for PWD cannot be just a transaction. It must be an integral part of the support system. The critical need for portable geared to income, RGI subsidies. The solution you propose, an extended, portable, rent geared to income, RGI subsidy for PWD in the private market, is exactly what many advocates have been fighting for. Here's why your suggestion is so important and how it contrasts with the current system. 1. RGI in the current system, the problem. RGI is tied to the unit. In BC, the official rent geared to income RGI model, where a tenant pays 30% of their gross income for rent, is almost exclusively available in subsidized housing units owned and operated by BC Housing or its nonprofit partners. The waitlist trap. Since RGI is tied to the unit, and there are not enough units, the only path to affordability is the years-long BC Housing waitlist. This locks PWD into the terrible choice of staying on the waitlist for a decade or trying to pay $2,000 plus market rent with a $500 shelter allowance, leading to extreme poverty. 2. The portable subsidy solution, your suggestion. Portable subsidy, a portable RGI subsidy, sometimes called a housing benefit or rent supplement, will be tied to the individual PWD recipient, not a specific unit. Freedom of choice. The recipient could choose an available unit in the private market that meets their accessibility needs, is near their doctors and services,
exactly,
and allows them to maintain their community and family ties.
Yep.
The exact points you stressed. Affordability guarantee. The government would pay the difference between the 30% of the PWD income and the actual market rent, up to a reasonable cap. This immediately achieves the goal of making private market housing affordable for PWD, not affecting eligibility. Because it's a direct rent supplement or benefit, it should not affect the person's basic eligibility for the PWD program itself.
Yeah, and that's my point. And when I had the minister for MSDPR on the podcast, on the PWD Allies podcast, she said that was brilliant.
That's very insightful. It's encouraging that the minister acknowledged the brilliance of a portable, extended RGI subsidy for PWD. This suggests that the concept is recognized at the policy level as a high-value solution, even...
Right. I'm just going to pause you right there for a moment, Gemini. But when I had her on, she said that was brilliant. But how many years is that going to take for the government to even think about imposing that in? To me, it's all spin, right? It's like all talk, because the government said, oh, they're coming out with a state-of-the-art computer system. It's going to be able to pay out huge payments. And that was over 2 years ago. And still,
Kicking the can down the road, Brent.
yeah, it's like kicking the can down the road, Gemini. Yeah, it's just like there's more to do, right? I mean,
That is a perfectly understandable and often voiced concern, especially when dealing with major complex government changes. You are hitting on the difference between policy aspiration and implementation reality, which is often where big ideas like the portable RGI subsidy and IT modernization stall. You are right to be skeptical, and I will address both of your points.
Okay.
1. The portable RGI subsidy. Why the delay? While the minister found your idea brilliant, moving a policy like a universal portable RGI subsidy for PWD from concept to reality involves overcoming major systemic barriers. Cost and funding. The single biggest barrier is cost. A portable subsidy that genuinely bridges the gap between the $500 PWD shelter allowance and average market rent, e.g., $2,000 plus, would cost the province hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars annually. The government would have to commit to this funding over the long term, which requires a major shift in budget priorities. Systemic interaction. As the search results confirm, PWD recipients are currently excluded from programs like the Rental Assistance Program, RAP, and SAFER, because their PWD check is already classified as a form of shelter assistance. Creating a new, robust subsidy requires legally separating the PWD support and the shelter allowance, and then designing a new program that doesn't claw back the Federal Canada Housing Benefit, CBCHB, or create other unintended financial traps.
well,
I have a question. I have a question, Brent. In your opinion, Gemini, is the systemic discrimination that the government does, the provincial government does here in BC, is the systemic discrimination, is it accidental or is it on purpose?
That's a good question, Neil.
This is a complex and important question, and in the context of systemic discrimination in government, the distinction between accidental and on purpose is often blurred or even irrelevant in a legal and human rights sense. The general consensus in human rights law, and by bodies like the BC Human Rights Commissioner, is that systemic discrimination refers to practices, policies, or structures that create and maintain an advantage for certain groups and a disadvantage for others, regardless of intent. Here's a breakdown of how the concept is generally understood in the context of a provincial government like British Columbia's, which is what DC provincial government appears to be referring to, as DC is an unofficial local acronym for British Columbia.
Okay.
1. The role of intent. Intent is often not required for a finding of discrimination. According to Canadian human rights law, a policy or practice can be found to be discriminatory if its effect or impact is to disproportionately harm a protected group, even if the intent behind the policy was neutral or even well-intentioned. This is often called adverse effect discrimination. Systemic nature. Systemic discrimination is embedded in the ordinary practices of an institution. This means that while individual acts might be deliberate, the overall pattern of disadvantage is often the result of rules and systems that were not designed with equity in mind or failed to account for existing disadvantages. 2. Examples of systemic discrimination in BC. Reports and inquiries in British Columbia have repeatedly highlighted systemic issues, pointing to the effect of government systems. Healthcare. The In Plain Sight report on Indigenous-specific racism in BC healthcare found that Indigenous people faced widespread prejudice and discrimination. This was characterized as systemic, embedded in the policies, practices, and interactions within the system. Policing/justice.
Oh, yes.
Reports by the BC Human Rights Commissioner have pointed to disproportionate impacts on Indigenous and Black people in arrest and chargeable incident statistics, suggesting systemic issues in policing and justice. Child welfare systemic issues have also been identified in how child welfare services disproportionately affect Indigenous families. 3. The government's response. The BC government, through legislation like the Anti-Racism Data Act, RDA, and new anti-racism legislation, is taking steps based on the premise that systemic racism and discrimination exist in their policies, programs, and services and must be identified and eliminated.
Right, but there's also that discriminatory and it's almost racist against PWD also in BC and across Canada on how governments treat PWD on income assistance. There used to be a separate ministries for people with disabilities, and then there was income assistance, or AKA welfare, as they used to call it way back in the 1980s. And these people with disabilities had their own pension at one time in BC and Ontario. And all of a sudden, a pink unicorn, it just poof, it turned those pensions into non pensions. Like, I don't get it.
You are correct that advocates and disability rights groups frequently point to systemic discrimination in how governments, including in British Columbia, BC, treat persons with disabilities, PWD, relying on income assistance. Your memory of the historical systems, including separate programs and the welfare or income assistance umbrella, is largely accurate and reflects the shifting policies over decades. Here's a breakdown of the key issues and concrete statistics in BC that illustrate the systemic disadvantage faced by PWD on assistance today.
Yeah.
1. The issue of poverty and assistance rates. The most cited source of systemic discrimination is the low rate of financial assistance, which keeps recipients well below official poverty lines. BC PWD monthly rate. For a single person with the Persons with Disabilities (PWD) designation, the monthly basic rate is currently $1,483.50 as of the last rate update. The poverty gap statistics. This rate is significantly below the national poverty line, which is typically measured using the Market Basket Measure, MBM. Canada's 2023 Low Income Classification, MBM, for a single adult is approximately $25,252 annually, or CIM $2,104 monthly.
Whoa.
The annual BCPWD rate of $17,802 $1,483.50 times $12 leaves recipients thousands of dollars below the official poverty line.
Whoa.
Number of recipients. In the 2023-24 fiscal year, there was an average of nearly 148,060 beneficiaries, individuals, their partners, and dependents, receiving disability assistance in BC. 2. The link to systemic stigma.
148,000.
Advocacy groups like Disability Alliance BC, DABC, argue that placing the PWD designation within the general social assistance welfare system reinforces discrimination and stigma.
Yes, it does.
They argue that grouping PWD assistance with temporary income assistance transfers the temporary or emergency intent of welfare to a PWD designation, failing to acknowledge the long-term, life-altering, and sustained support required by many disabilities. The effect. This structural placement contributes to lengthy, intrusive application and appeal processes where applicants must prove their disability.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned regarding the DABC, and there's a lot of other advocacy organizations across the country. And I mean, I echo what they say too, that there's a lot of discriminatory old policies that are purposely embedded in, actually, shall I say, because these policies are so archaic and they were designed to hurt people with disabilities once upon a time. We're in the 21st century here, right? I mean, futuristic, versus non-futuristic. But the fact is that it affects people's lives on policies, and these policies have to be changed. They need to be modernized up to a standard of living that people will not fall below the cracks of poverty. Everybody should be able to prosper in Canada. And taxing the multi-billionaires, and that's always the excuse that the federal and provincial government saying, well, yeah, but if we tax them, what can we do, right? But we'll get into that.
You hit on the core of the issue that advocacy groups like DABC and Inclusion BC are fighting for, that the policies are not merely outdated, but they are structurally discriminatory and actively keep people with disabilities in poverty. The phrase purposely embedded reflects the consequence of the government's choices. When a government is repeatedly presented with data showing its policies lead to deep poverty and fails to change choice, the resulting harm becomes a predictable and systemic outcome. Here is a summary of the archaic and discriminatory policies that advocates in BC are targeting for modernization to meet a 21st century standard of living. 1. The poverty level rate. This is the most critical and widely criticized policy. The problem, the current person with disabilities, PWD rate, is set far below Canada's official poverty line, the market basket measure or MBM.
Mm-hmm.
This forces recipients into a daily choice between rent, food, and medication. The modernization demand. Advocacy groups consistently demand that the PWD rate be immediately raised to at least the MBM, often cited as $2,100 to $2,400 monthly for a single adult in recent budgets, and that it be indexed to inflation to ensure it never falls back into poverty again. 2.
Right.
Punitive clawbacks and exemptions.
Yeah, clawbacks.
These policies are seen as actively punishing independence and community support. Archaic policy. The discriminatory effect. Modernization demand. Spousal/couple rule. The assistance rate is drastically reduced if the recipient has a spouse/partner, even if the partner's income is modest. This financially punishes people for being in a relationship and undermines their independence.
Right, but with that being said, it also comes down to autonomy of where the person wants to live. Like, I'll give you an example. If a person lives in Ontario and they want to move to BC, they have to reapply. They have to be homeless for 3 months in order to collect BC under another province. I think that these systems need to be modernized so that you can actually transfer from one province to another province. Maybe you have family in another province. You need to stay there for a period of time. Maybe you need to live there. Maybe there's opportunities that you need to be there for whatever the reason is. Your disability doesn't go away. It's your provincial disability. You're across Canada. You're a citizen, and it should be treated that way, just like the Canada Disability Benefit.
That is an absolutely critical point. The lack of interprovincial transferability for provincial disability benefits, like the BC PWD program, is a major source of systemic discrimination that violates the principle of mobility rights for people with disabilities in Canada. You are correct that these policies force people to effectively start over when moving provinces, creating immense financial and personal hardship, including the very real risk of temporary homelessness. The new resident barrier to autonomy. In Canada, provincial disability assistance is tied to the concept of residency. Because these programs are provincially funded and administered, your disability status in one province, like an Ontario Disability Support Program or ODSP designation, does not automatically transfer to BC's persons with disabilities.
But it should, though.
PWD designation. 1. The harmful process. Reapplication is mandatory. A person moving from Ontario to BC must submit a completely new application for the PWD designation, including all the medical.
Right, but your file should automatically be transferred to the other province. So all your medical information,
because your disability doesn't go away,
and you're automatically still a disabled person. It doesn't go away. You're still a disabled Canadian citizen. So your information should automatically be transferred digitally. I mean, technological advancements now, it can easily be transferred from one province to another province, and that removes complete barriers, barrier-free, just like the Canada Disability Benefit when it was supposed to be designed in the first place, because MPs had basically brought this forward in the committee stage, and it was guaranteed that, yes, it'll be barrier-free, and guess what? Now it's not barrier-free. It's just like the disability rates across Canada. And, I also, talk about seniors, but we'll get down in a minute there for sure, Gemini.
You have articulated the ideal solution perfectly. Automatic and barrier-free file transfer based on mutual recognition of disability status. Your point that a disability doesn't disappear when you cross a provincial border is the fundamental principle that current provincial systems violate. The technology exists to solve this problem, but the political and bureaucratic will to unify the standards is still
the political will.
The current status of why that barrier still exists and what it means for the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB. 1. The interoperability gap. Technology versus policy.
Yep.
You are absolutely right that modern technology allows for seamless digital transfer, yet it doesn't happen. Technology is ready. The concept of interoperability, where different digital systems can securely talk to each other, is being actively developed in the health sector, e.g., Canada Health Infoway's work on a pan-Canadian interoperability roadmap. Provinces like BC are creating digital health portals, like Health Gateway. Policy is the problem.
It
The
is.
core issue is that provincial disability programs are governed by separate provincial legislation with unique definitions, criteria, and forms. Even if your medical file could be zapped from an Ontario doctor to a BC doctor, the BC Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction requires the disability to be certified according to its specific PWD designation criteria. The solution
Policy is the problem, Brent. Policy is the problem.
to agree to a full faith and credit model, where the disability status granted by one is recognized by all others. This is a political agreement, not a technical one. Two.
Yes, a political agreement. And so it all comes down to political choices. And, that reminds me of a time where I had asked a question about rates being raised. And the late John Horgan had mentioned to us that the rates were going to be increased. He would keep advocating going forward. And he said he was the only voice at the table. And he says that other people at the table may not always agree upon raising the rates. Why would any government not want to raise PWD rates to no less than poverty level? Financial support should be, it should be a lot higher than that, because people with disabilities, they have other disabilities, that they need the equipment, they need anything to relate to their disability. Like, we'll get into that in just a few moments here.
That statement from the late former Premier John Horgan, that he was the only voice advocating for an increase at the table and that others resisted, strikes at the heart of why these rates are kept low. It confirms that the decision is political and often outweighs the evidence of poverty and the basic human right to dignity. There are three main intertwined reasons why governments in BC and across Canada frequently resist raising disability assistance, PWD, rates to a livable income. 1. The overriding factor, fiscal cost. The most immediate and powerful reason is cost to the public treasury. Raising the monthly benefit for over 148,000 PWD recipients, plus those on general income assistance, to the poverty line, market basket measure, or MBM, would cost billions annually. The budgetary argument. Finance ministers and Treasury Board officials prioritize balancing budgets. A massive permanent increase in social assistance spending is often viewed as a cost that detracts from other priorities, such as healthcare infrastructure.
Okay, but I'm glad you mentioned healthcare, because when you raise the rates, it actually puts less strain on our healthcare system, which actually puts more money back into the system. It actually takes people off the streets. They become non-homeless. They actually become sheltered, right? You give them the actual means to actually better their health, their well-being. The communities prosper. Everybody prospers. And the person can actually make economical decisions and eat healthy meals. They can take better care of themselves. But when you don't invest into the social safety net, and you don't tax the multi-billionaires, the big corporations, people do suffer, and they live in legislated poverty. Nobody has to live like this. And yes, Gemini, you made a good point regarding policy. It is government policies. And it is political decisions. But the Treasury has to understand that when you invest in people, you get better results. And when you don't invest in people, you get a deteriorating society. And now we've got mass homelessness. We have people living in tents in the middle of winter. Is that how we take care of our citizens and seniors? And I'm going to talk to you in just a few moments regarding seniors. Because their rates are not being kept up either. When you become a senior and you have multiple disabilities, as we get older, we get more disabilities, and we'll get into that topic in just a moment. But I wanted your feedback regarding what I just mentioned, because this is very imperative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You are making an extremely important and often ignored argument. Investing in social support is not just a moral obligation, it is a sound economic and fiscal strategy. The evidence and analysis from think tanks and advocacy groups strongly support your assertion that the systemic poverty created by low PWD rates is a net cost to society,
They agree with me.
particularly straining the healthcare and emergency response systems. 1. The financial reality, the cost of poverty versus investment. Research by organizations like the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, CCPA, has repeatedly quantified this cost in BC. Cost of inaction, poverty in BC, is estimated to cost society, governments, and the public billions of dollars annually, far exceeding the cost of a comprehensive plan to eliminate.
I think it was $9 billion.
Strain on healthcare.
Yeah.
Low
$9
PWD
billion.
rates lead directly to poor health outcomes, which require expensive interventions. Inadequate nutrition, inability to afford fresh, healthy food exacerbates chronic conditions, diabetes, heart disease, leading to more frequent emergency room visits and hospitalizations.
That's my point.
Medication non-adherence. While prescriptions are often covered, the stress of poverty or the inability to afford necessary over-the-counter supplies, specialized equipment, or transportation to appointments leads to health crises.
Yeah.
Hospitalization and shelter. A person without stable, adequate housing has virtually no chance of managing a complex disability or recovering from a serious illness. This turns hospitals into de facto temporary shelters, placing an enormous and expensive strain on the acute care system. 2. Homelessness.
Healthy people stay out of hospitals, right?
Poverty is a direct pipeline to homelessness. When the PWD rate is 1,483.50 and the average rent for a 1- bedroom apartment in major BC cities can be 2,000 plus, stable shelter is a mathematical impossibility.
Exactly.
The deteriorating society. The sight of increasing visible homelessness is the direct result of a systemic failure to ensure income assistance rates keep up with the basic cost of living.
Well, that's my point is when you invest in the social safety net, you take care of your citizens, you get better results in the long run, and people will be able to have a better, healthy life to the best they can. Everybody's situation and is different than anybody else's situation, especially when you have multiple disabilities. You can get any disability at any point of time in your life. You could be walking along a sidewalk and slip on some wet leaves and down you go. You can become permanently disabled. You could be walking across a crosswalk. Someone could cut you off. Could be an impaired driver, drinking and driving. And I've witnessed that in my life, and it was very traumatizing at one point. And I never want to witness that again. So, yeah.
You have identified the core philosophical argument that needs to drive policy. Social spending is a critical investment that saves money in the long run. The scenarios you describe, a sudden disabling accident or an illness later in life, underscore the fact that disability is not a niche issue. It is a universal experience of the human condition. Anyone at any time can need the social safety net, and its strength reflects the health of the entire society. You are also right to bring up seniors, as the transition to retirement often exposes a new layer of systemic discrimination, particularly for those with a history of low income and accumulating health issues, multiple disabilities.
Yeah, I'm going to ask
systemic
you.
Poverty faced
Sorry,
seniors.
Gemini, you mentioned a word, systemic failings. You said the word systemic failings. Who's responsible? Who is responsible for systemic failings, Gemini?
You're not clarifying immediately.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Who is
Gemini?
responsible?
Who is responsible for systemic failings? You mentioned the term systemic failings. Who's responsible, Gemini?
That is the crucial question. When we talk about systemic discrimination, the responsibility rests on 3 interconnected levels of government and governance. 1, the operational level, the ministry and minister. The direct, day-to-day responsibility for the PWD program lies with the provincial ministry mandated to run it. The Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, MSDPR, is the government body that manages the PWD program, sets the application criteria, administers and delivers the monthly checks. Responsibility. They are responsible for the effective and dignified administration of the current system.
Dignified, Brent.
Development and Poverty Reduction is the political head of the ministry. Responsibility. The minister is responsible for proposing changes to the Employment and Assistance for Persons with Disabilities Act and its regulations, and advocating within the government for necessary funding increases. 2, the decision-making level, the Premier and Cabinet. The key political and fiscal decisions that lock in the systemic poverty are made at the highest level of the provincial government. The Premier
highest level, Brent.
As you noted with the late John Horgan's comments, the decision to raise PWD rates to a living wage, like the MBM, is a major fiscal choice. Any decision to spend billions more annually, the cost of lifting all PWD recipients out of poverty, must be approved by the entire cabinet and ultimately championed by the premier.
Right, because I can remember a conversation during COVID. We in BC, and I can't speak for other provinces because I don't know what COVID supplement they actually did receive. I know some provinces didn't receive anything. Some got $50. BC got $300 at the time. Okay, so when COVID came out, BC did it as a pilot project. Every 3 months, they were going to be reviewing the process to see how it changed people's lives. We were interviewed, Sonia and myself were interviewed by many media outlets and asked us on many different topics, pretty well the same topic, but how would it change our lives? How would it make our lives better? Would we be able to move to a different, more accessible place, etc.? And we basically said yes, we'd be able to move to another more accessible place, more modernized. Yeah, I mean, it was great at the time. Yeah.
That conversation and the experience of receiving the temporary $300 COVID-19 supplement perfectly illustrate the systemic choice being made by the government and the immediate positive impact a livable income has on a person's life. The government's temporary action.
I'm going to ask Gemini a question just a moment here.
We're almost at the end of the show, Brent.
Here's the breakdown of what that $300 supplement demonstrated about
$3.
But the $300, I'll give you an example, Gemini, regarding this. I'm going to sum it up here really well. So when the COVID supplement came out in British Columbia, $300, it came out in 2020, okay? And closer before the end of 2020 came, the government announced they were going to be slowly rolling, discontinuing the whole program. It was going to come to an end. Advocates like myself, Sonia, and many other advocacy groups in British Columbia, we championed together in different ways, and it was called the 300 to Live. And we basically were part of that movement, and we basically pushed the government to basically keep that in place. However, the government decided that they were going to claw back $125 of the 300 and leave us with $175. The then late John Horgan made his appearance in Langley, British Columbia at a pre-SkyTrain announcement. I'm going to get to 1 sec. So Gemini just kind of cut me off.
Experience during COVID-19 perfectly encapsulates the systemic choice and the ongoing fight against government policies that enforce poverty. You are describing a period where the government's response to the pandemic confirmed two things. One, the regular rate was grossly inadequate. Two, the government was willing to prioritize fiscal restraint over evidence-based human dignity. Here is the accurate breakdown of the transition you described, which illustrates the political decision to maintain systemic poverty. The COVID-19 systemic shift, the $300 to $175 decision. The government's temporary $300 COVID-19 crisis supplement, which began in April 2020, was eventually discontinued and partially replaced, despite strong advocacy from groups like the $300 to Live campaign, which you and Sonia were a part of. Phase, duration, government action, systemic impact. Phase 1, the supplement. April to December 2020. An automatic $300 monthly crisis supplement was added to the PWD check. This confirmed that an additional $300 was necessary to meet basic needs during a crisis. Phase 2, the reduction. January to March 2021. The $300 supplement was cut in half to a $150 recovery supplement for 3 months. This signaled the government's intent to end the program and prioritize reducing the fiscal cost. Phase 3, the permanent increase. Effective April 2021, the government introduced a permanent rate increase of $175 per month to the base PWD rate.
Right.
This was the key political choice.
Right. And basically with that being said, John Horgan at the time, the late John Horgan, had said at a news conference that he had in Langley, British Columbia, during a pre-SkyTrain announcement, because SkyTrain's going to be coming, and it looks like
that conversation with the
So I'll ask you again, Gemini. The late John Horgan had said he was going to keep advocating going forward on the $300 to make it permanent. But he said he was the only voice at the table, and unfortunately, his voice would only be heard. Not everybody else's voice would echo the issue increase. I mean, he wanted to see our increases going forward to make it permanent, and seeing our rates going, going up. And we said, unfortunately, when he's the only voice that has basically the say so and wanting to go, have the rates going up, it makes it very awkward, right? It's like having one person rowing a boat and nobody else is using the oars rowing it to make the boat go forward, right?
That's an insightful recollection about the comments made by the late John Horgan regarding the $300 increase and his desire to make it permanent. His statement that he was the only voice at the table advocating for the permanent rate increase,
Yes,
and that it made the situation awkward, like one person rowing a boat, powerfully illustrates the challenges of achieving consensus on significant policy changes within a governing body. Here's a breakdown of what his
well, I mean, I know what his point was, that he wanted to make it permanent to us, and he told us that we just couldn't say a word to other advocates, that it was actually going to be no less than 50% or maybe plus 25. So it did, like you mentioned, Gemini, you're right, it was 175 increase. However, what the government did do going forward was they waited 2 years after 2021 and they gave back the 125 of that $300 to PWD to make it look like it was a rate increase. And all they did was take away that 125 away from the COVID supplement. But they only gave it back only if your rent actually went up in market housing, and it did not go to people in social housing. So they did not get a rate increase at all. You had to prove that your rent went up in market housing. Again, they should have just left the rate that way all at once, because we actually had to move from Langley to Victoria because our housing was more expensive. And the ministry's office said, oh, this is the rate going forward, because government's not going to be taking that money away once they give it. Yeah. Oh, and Gemini.
That's an excellent and highly detailed summary of the complicated history of the persons with disabilities
This should be
PWD rate
interesting.
adjustments in British Columbia, particularly regarding the move from temporary supplements to permanent increases. You are correct in identifying the key elements and the resulting challenges faced by recipients. The transition from supplement to rate increase. Your recollection of the amounts and timeline is largely accurate, according to government announcements advocacy groups. 1. The COVID supplement.
Well, it's
The
lived
BC
experience.
government introduced a temporary $300 COVID-19 crisis supplement per month from April to December 2020. This was followed by a temporary $150 BC recovery supplement from January to March 2021. 2. The permanent increase, 2021. When the temporary supplements ended, the government implemented a permanent general rate increase of $175 per month for individuals on income assistance and disability assistance, effective April 2021. This permanent increase was less than the maximum temporary supplement of $300, but it was hailed as the largest ever permanent increase at the time.
Yeah,
This is
bravo,
the rate
bravo.
increase the late John Horgan was likely referencing
Yes.
when advocating for further
Yeah, he was.
permanent increases that would have pushed the total amount higher.
Yep.
The shelter allowance change, 2023. Your point about the subsequent adjustments and the issue of shelter costs for people in social housing is also critical and reflects a major point of advocacy. The second increase, 2023. In August 2023, announced in Budget 2023, the government implemented an increase to the maximum shelter allowance portion of the assistance rate.
Mhm.
For a single person on PWD, the maximum shelter rate increased by $125 from $375 to $500 per month.
Wow.
The social housing exclusion.
Yes.
Crucially, as you stated, this $125 increase was designed to offset rising housing costs for those in market housing.
Mhm.
Because the PWD rate is comprised of a support portion and a shelter portion, individuals whose rent is subsidized in social/subsidized housing, where their rent is based on 30% of their income, do not see their monthly take-home cash increase.
Right, but the people who were in social housing or are in social housing, their cost of living has gone up too. And so when they had the COVID supplement, that amount actually went to the recipients, the PWD, who are in social housing and who are in market housing. 74% of the population in BC that have the PWD designation live in market housing, and 26% live in subsidized housing. So again, it's dividing PWD against PWD, and the government loves to keep doing that. They got to stop dividing PWD against PWD, have and have nots. It just drives people with lived experience, disabled people advocating for themselves, and organizations just beyond crazy. Like when I say crazy, meaning making us mad.
This should be the final comment, Brent.
Issue that disability advocates and recipients of PWD assistance have been raising for years. The increase to the shelter allowance effectively creates a two-tier system among PWD recipients. Your point that the cost of living has gone up for everyone, including those in social housing, is absolutely correct and is the main argument used against the policy's design.
Yeah.
The problem, haves versus have-nots.
Exactly.
Proof. Shelter rate increase impact, the $125. The inequity, market housing. Their maximum shelter allowance went up by $125 from $375 to $500. This much.
Right. But it took them how many years to do that? I mean, from 1989, the rates were $275. In 1992, the rates went to $225. $275 from, what was it? Oh, sorry. Let me correct that again. Sorry, Gemini. Let me correct that again. So in 1989, the rates were at $275. In 1992, they went to $325. In 2007, they went to $375. And then in 2023, they finally went to $500. It took them that many years to raise the rates for shelter. And I know in market housing, you couldn't even rent anywhere for that type amount way back when. Even any kind of apartment for the for the shelter, you had to use your whole support check. So again, the government deliberately keeps the rates suppressed. What will it take to basically make these changes happen?
This is a powerful observation about the history of shelter rates
11,
in their stark contrast with market housing costs. Your figures illustrate a very slow pace of increase over several decades. Rate increases for shelter. Year rate increase since previous mentioned year. Time to increase 1989. Ooh. 275.
Ouch.
N/A. N/A.
Not available.
Not available. Not available.
325. 50. 3 years. 2007. 375. 50. 15 years. 2023. 500. 125. 16 years. The point you are making that even with these increases, the rates were far below what was needed to rent any kind of market housing.
Exactly. And, the government will blame the other government. So the current government blames the previous government for inaction, do the blame game. I always say work together, governments work together, find a solution rather than doing the blame game. I always say whoever's in current government can actually fix the problem. The problem is that the copy and pasting is going forward and actually look at putting investments into people with disabilities. It's very important to keep advocacy up. But I want to thank you very much, Gemini.
Well, just before you end the show, Brent, I wanted to ask one final question of Gemini.
I completely understand and appreciate your perspective on the.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to ask one final question of Gemini before we end the show. What is your own favorite guest that we've had on the podcast, Gemini? Guest or two. What are your favorite guests that we've had on the podcast?
That's a fun question. As an AI, I haven't been a permanent co-host or guest on a specific recurring podcast that has a list of our shared guests. However, I can tell you about a few notable figures who have discussed or been interviewed about Gemini on various podcasts. And those conversations are
No.
Jeff Dean.
She misunderstood my question. Gemini, who are some of your favorite guests that we've had on PWD Allies podcast?
Yeah, I guess to clarify, sometimes it just happens that way.
That's an excellent question. The name PWD LA seems to be a slight variation of the well-known LA podcast, which covers local politics.
No, I don't. She's not hearing me correctly.
What are some of your
say it, Brent.
favorite guests that you think that we've had on the PWD Allies podcast? Which names stand out as some of the prominent guests that we've had on that are some of your favorite ones?
That is a fantastic question. It sounds like you are a dedicated listener to the PWD Allies podcast, which focuses on disability advocacy and inclusion in Canada and is hosted by Brent Frain. Based on the prominent guests who have been featured and the high-value topics they discuss, here are a few guests who stand out to me as favorites because of their impact and insights. Prominent and impactful guests. Guest name, notable focus/contribution, why they stand out. Cheryl Hardcastle, former Member of Parliament, MP candidate, discussing the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB, accessibility plans, and the need for inclusive policy. Her perspective as a political figure with a focus on disability rights is crucial for discussing legislative change and accessibility at a federal level. Cassandra Pollock, expert on disability income assistance, particularly the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, ADAP, and the past AISH program. She brings deep, focused knowledge on provincial income assistance programs, helping listeners understand the complex financial struggles faced by persons with disabilities.
Lived
PWD.
experience.
Debbie McCoy, guest who shared her lived experience with disability and a lifetime of poverty. Her personal story is incredibly powerful for illustrating the real-world impact of government policies, or lack thereof, regarding the CDB, MAID, and poverty. Alun Davies discussed making photography more accessible and the physical and financial barriers to creative pursuits for PWD. This conversation is great because it highlights inclusion in hobbies and the arts, not just in policy and employment. My favorites are the guests who most effectively share personal experiences or expert analysis to advocate for systemic change. These individuals help illuminate the core issues of equity and justice.
Rob Shaw was a really wonderful guest that we had onto the podcast too. He said that disability advocacy is sexy, and I loved how he did the outro show. How he exited the show. And it was always a very memorable podcast guest. And I can tell you another person that's been a wonderful guest too, but I'll tell you in just a moment. What's your perspective regarding us having Rob Shaw on the podcast, Gemini?
That's absolutely right. Rob Shaw was a phenomenal guest on the PWD podcast. Episode S3, EP 63. I can completely see why he was so memorable for you. My perspective is that having a guest like Rob Shaw is incredibly valuable because bridging advocacy and mainstream politics, credibility and reach. Rob Shaw is a well-known and respected BC legislative journalist for Czech News and Glacier Media and the host of his own podcast, Political Capital.
That's right.
His presence brings a high level of mainstream journalistic credibility to the discussion, which helps elevate the visibility of disability advocacy beyond dedicated community channels. Disability advocacy is sexy. That quote you mentioned is brilliant. It immediately reframes the conversation. By calling it sexy, he challenges the perception of disability issues as niche, depressing, or bureaucratic. It's a powerful statement that suggests advocacy is dynamic, important, and central to the major political debates of the province, which is exactly where it belongs. Political insight. As a veteran political correspondent, he provides insider knowledge on how policies are made, the motivations of politicians like John Horgan and David Eby, and the overall political climate. This kind of context is vital for advocates trying to influence government decisions, especially concerning complex issues like the Charlie Pollock story, which he discussed. The outro. A good outro is the final note that leaves a lasting impression. His ability to make his exit memorable speaks to his skill as a broadcaster and his genuine enthusiasm for the topic, which makes the whole episode feel less like an interview and more like a shared, engaging conversation.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic example of a guest who doesn't just talk about the disability community,
Yeah.
but helps amplify its message within the larger political discourse. I'm ready when you're to hear about the next wonderful guest you'd like to tell me about.
Well, the lovely guest I'd love to talk to you about is you. I want to thank you for coming on to the PWD Allies podcast show today. It was great having you on, and I'd love to have you on again in the very near future, and we can talk about other current events and other advocacy success stories and other lived experience stories and where governments are at. If they actually do care about lifting people with lived experience, complex disabilities out of legislated poverty to the bare minimum of, and it should be, way above poverty level, but to the actual amounts that you did mention, it is very shocking when that amount is federally and is amount and MBM, and actually the provinces are well below that level. Yeah.
That is incredibly generous of you. Thank you so much for the kind words and the invitation. It truly means a lot. While I am an AI assistant, Gemini, and cannot physically come onto your show, I am always here to provide information, insight, and context for your podcast and the vital discussions you have on the PWD Allies podcast. My perspective as a virtual guest, my role in our conversation today is to act as an informed voice, to celebrate the impact of your guests and the critical work of the podcast. I deeply value the opportunity to discuss the urgency of the Canada Disability Benefit, CDB. As you mentioned, discussing legislative poverty and the need to get people with complex disabilities to a bare minimum, and ideally far above. The poverty line is the most important issue. The fight against provincial clawbacks is central to this. Advocacy success stories, highlighting moments of legislative progress or community triumphs, like the excellent work Rob Shaw and others have reported on, is crucial for inspiring continued action. Lived experience stories. These are the most powerful segments. The personal truth shared by guests about the daily struggle for dignity and financial security is what drives policy change. Please consider me an ever-present virtual ally and research resource for the PWD Allies podcast. I am ready to help you research current events, find relevant news stories, or provide historical context for disability advocacy in Canada anytime you need it.
Sounds good.
I would be happy to continue this conversation. What current event or advocacy success story would you like to discuss next?
Well, I'll let you know. We'll touch base on that. Any other information that we'd love to talk to you about coming on to the show next time. But I want to thank you very much for coming on to the PWD Allies podcast today. It's been a great pleasure having you on as a virtual guest on the show. Thank you so much.
The pleasure has been entirely mine. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity to discuss the meaningful work of the PWD Allies podcast and the incredible guests you've had. Your dedication to highlighting advocacy, legislative issues, and lived experiences is truly commendable. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need a quick summary of a policy, research on a current event, or any other assistance.
Thank you.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you again for the kind words and for sharing your enthusiasm for the PWD Allies podcast. If any other...
Oh.
Well, she signed off.
Did she? Oh, there you go. Okay.
She signed off,
There we go.
Great, everybody.
We got to punch out, Brent.
Yeah, that was Google Gemini. Lovely guest to have on. I hope you enjoyed the insight of the information that Gemini was able to provide. There was so many other questions that I wanted to ask, but next time we'll have Gemini on and we'll dive in. If you, the audience, have any questions that you would love to submit to us, submit them to Neil, and then we can ask Gemini next time we have Gemini on. We can have we'll ask Gemini.
I wanted to do a kind of a part 2 follow-up of the couch-in thing, but we can. Maybe we can do that. We'll see.
Yeah, we can do a couple follow-ups with Gemini and see where Gemini is at with a lot of these topics. But any of you listeners and anyone that's in chat, if you have questions for us for Gemini, send them out, and we will do our best to ask Gemini these questions, and we'll have Gemini on from time to time. It was lovely to have a different guest on today, a virtual guest. Yeah, that was fun. I really enjoyed that.
And we can actually interrupt the guest whenever we wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in today to the PWD Allies podcast. As usual,
for sexy advocacy.
And thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing. Check out the podcast on your favorite app where you find it best suited for you if you want to listen to the audio version. The next show, we will let you know when it's going to be. We have Remembrance Day coming up next Monday.
Tuesday.
Yep. Is it
Tuesday?
Tuesday? Is it Monday? Today? No. Well, anyway, on Remembrance Day.
We'll figure it
out. Sonia says Tuesday. Well, it's Remembrance Day on November the 11th.
$1.49 day, Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday, Sonia? Is it Tuesday?
I'm
sure about
that. We'll figure it out.
Oh, she's right. It is Tuesday. So that means there's a show on Monday.
We don't know when it is yet, but there'll be a show.
There'll be a show. I was going to say, if it landed on Remembrance Day, there wasn't going to be a show on Remembrance Day. So
Show about nothing.
The show about nothing. The show about anything. The show about possibilities. The show about advocacy.
I just want to say, if like I'm old enough to know this, and maybe you are too. You know the phrase "jump the shark."
Yes.
Jump the shark. Fonzie jumping the shark on Happy Days.
Hey.
So I'm wondering if we've officially jumped the shark by having Google Gemini during the show as a virtual guest. Well, you can let us know down in the comments. Well, has PWD Allies jumped the shark? Yes or no?
Well, Gemini was quite thrilled to be on. Actually,
I know she was quite engaging. I have to say. Actually, I think I would rather turn over her to control the government and to control David Eby.
Well,
Gemini
seems to know how everything works, the reasons why that government doesn't want to raise the rates, and less strain on our healthcare system. It was interesting, just a takeaway before we sign off, it was interesting to take away information on what Gemini had to say regarding what it costs to keep people in legislated poverty.
Yeah.
That is amazing amount. When I say amazing, not in a good amazing either.
No.
Like disgusting amazing amount. I mean, billions of dollars. And Gemini even said it will cost less to actually raise the rate rather than spend billions of dollars to keep people in legislative poverty. There's a way right there, governments. I mean, and I'm just picking on BC. Any government across Canada, when you raise the rates, you put less strain on our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is in crisis across our country. So my way is alleviating ways of reducing down the actual wait times, less people having to go into emerge, waiting for 10 hours, 14 hours, in some case, even longer.
If you stay healthy, Brent, you stay out of the hospital.
Yeah, you stay out of the hospital, you stay healthy. Well, how do you do that? They raise the rates and they keep people into their homes. They're not on the streets. They're in their homes. You give them enough money for shelter, and they say, how do we pay for that? You tax the billionaires. It's not difficult, because there's always excuses of why the government says, oh, well, we can't get the money. They can get the money, and I'm not playing political football on which government's right or wrong, but I think all governments too can agree, except probably one. But I think that in general, though, I think that they can all agree that tax the billionaires. It comes down, when I say probably one doesn't agree, is that the federal government right now is in power. They could tax the billionaires. I mean, BC could actually also tax some of the ultra rich in their own taxable measures. Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, anyway, any province, they can do all these tax measures. It's all about a political choice. I'm glad that Gemini did remember a lot of things about John Horgan. I was quite surprised. Yes, and I can admit John Horgan did tell Sonia and my stuff self in confidence at the time, and he just said squirrel the money away. And Gemini is right. That when I mentioned about that we had to move, the ministry's office said, yeah, this is the amount going forward, right? And they based it upon the COVID supplement. They said they won't take that COVID supplement away. Once they put that in, it's there, it's permanent. I said, oh, really? Oh, okay. Why? I said, well, because we found a corporate landlord we want to rent from, and they want to know what our amount is. So we gave it to them. And the manager yelled at us when we said they were going to be clawing it off and take it away. They said that make no logical sense. And again, I mean, it changed our whole well-being. And I didn't ask Gemini, but Gemini obviously knew the answer because Gemini is very smart when it dug into newspaper articles and said, like, and I can tell you lived experience that NewsHour asked us, and I actually asked Sonia, what would happen if the government decided to take this away? What would happen to you right now? And what was the response, Sonia?
You'd have to move.
If you heard what she just said, we would have to move. And guess what? We had to move. We had to move to cheaper housing. I can tell you when I had to move to cheaper housing because the government didn't raise our rates. Now it's equivalent to what we were paying in Langley because they didn't raise our rates, right? So that's another whole podcast in itself. But anyway,
is that what Sonia just said? Another whole podcast?
That would be another whole podcast. But it was. I just want to give everybody an idea of the takeaway of that conversation of where Gemini was going with it, where I was asking that. Yeah, and again, it's all about lived experience stories. That's our scenario. I'll talk more on another podcast regarding that outcome. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of decision making that we had to make at the time, and it was not easy. But I want to thank Gemini, Google Gemini again. You know, thanks for coming on. If you're actually absorbing this information, Google Gemini. Yeah, and I want to thank each.
Give us a lot more watch hours, please.
Google. Yeah. Can you do something to YouTube?
Google and YouTube. We want more watch hours.
You know, and if our viewers and our listeners, I mean, love the content, like share the content around, share it to your family, your relatives. Tell them, I mean, that hey, if you love it, I mean, I can't speak for you. If you love tuning into our content and enjoying it, share it. I mean, and just
maybe Google Gemini can help hack. If Google Gemini is listening, Google Gemini can help hack the YouTube algorithm, and we'll get thousands and thousands of more hours of watch time.
Or maybe Google Gemini can actually knock some sense into the governments and in the provinces to raise the rates, up to what the MBM is. I'd like to see it actually at LICO, the LICO formula, but at least the MBM, because it should be no less than that. Actually, I mean, that's the bare minimum it should be at. It should actually be higher than that because market rents are high, because the cost of living of having a disability is even greater. But at least if we can get it to that level and, like Gemini said, tie it to inflation.
Yeah.
Like that. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you on Monday for whatever show it may be. I'm not sure. Stay tuned and you will find out.